Welcome to the F9 TRAX House Nation V1.5 update, and in this video I'm going to walk you through all the features of the Logic version.
Here's one of the new projects called Orbit. Later on, this builds up and breaks down to this. All of the main parts are coming in via MIDI, and that includes those lovely, lush 7th chords. There's actually two main piano parts playing here. And I've kind of made a Juno-esque piano. And I've got a lovely 90s string part coming in here. Now, drum-wise, we've actually used audio for some of the drum parts here, but then all of that's been cut up into kits. So inside of Logic, if we create a new instrument, all of the drum kits that we've got set up here will use Apple's and Logic's Drum Machine Designer, but we've got some tricks in there. We've actually got loops that are warped, pre-warped, and syncing to tempo. And when you've installed the preview Apple loops, you can drag a MIDI part onto any production. It will load the kit, all of the kit pieces, and play back a sequence that we've built for it. There are two discrete ways to load any of the sounds from this pack. You can use the library here to load a sound up. Or you can create an empty channel, get a preview of the sound, and then drag it onto your arrangement. This will actually load the entire patch, the multi-sampler, and obviously the demo MIDI that built the Apple loop. Of course, if you don't want it, you've just got to delete it. But all of these little sequences that we've built into the previews, they're all royalty-free as well. One type of patch I do want to show you are the stabs, vocals, and riff section here. These are tempo synchronized. So let's go for vocal ad-libs D minor. These have been built specifically for this project using our collection of vintage effects units. They will also sync to tempo. And because they've got flex time enabled, that means you can also tune them all the way down. And they will stay in time with your track. Let's look at the sax riffs, and to show you what I mean, I'm going to go right to the front just as the bass is starting to build up. Turn this down an octave down so it's still in key and I can throw things over the top. So as I say, these are the protocols that we're starting to work out for future TRAX and template-based releases. We're really proud of them. This is the first run out of them, so please let us know what you think about all of this. I'm using a little bit of a trick here on this production. At the beginning part over this groove section where you got the bass and the drums and everything firing, I'm in the Phygian mode, which is like an altered minor scale. We have a video on this on our YouTube channel. Please go and check it out. But to simply tell you what it is, if you're saying D minor, instead of using the note that's 2 semitones up, like a D minor, the next note would be the E, you use the note that's 1 semitone up. So in this case, from D, we go to D sharp or E flat. This provides a really interesting and dark mood. And even just from those 3 notes, you can hear that kind of additional darkness to it. And I'm sure you agree this is a great pluck sound. This is from a JP8000. Well, actually, it's from a JP8080. This is one of the original synths that changed everything in the 90s. It's one of the first virtual analogs to come out of Roland, and it had the super saw wave, which is a kind of emulation of multiple saw waves detuned against each other. And it was instrumental in original trance. Now, for this patch, we've got 4 round robins to get that kind of movement that you would from the original synth, but also we've sampled it with the filter quite wide open, and then we've added automation that are opening the filter up. And obviously we can fully automate that to make some really drastic changes. Now, for those of you that love yourself a bit of JP8080, if you go into the sound library, come into keys and synths, and we come down here, if you go to JP8K Super Saw Pad, you're going to get this monster. Now, even though this is set up as a pad, inside of the sampler, we've sampled the entire raw waveform filter fully open of the thing in Super Saw mode. And you hear that kind of squeal you get in the oscillator. That is so vital for this era of music. But you can use the synth controls of the sampler here to completely change that. So here's an example with me setting it up as a little bit of a pluck sound. And we've assigned the mod wheel to actually shut the filter down no matter where you are. So this is why it's always useful to fully investigate the sound library of the TRAX releases. There's some real surprises in there. Now in this production, we start to layer up as we get to that big breakdown. An organ bass comes in, also playing on the Phygian scale. Now, an awful lot going on there, and this is where I really wanted to show you some of the production techniques that really made this era stand out. We had to record the acid as a real-time squiggle. The reason being is capturing all of the power within a 303 and getting all of those filter circuits built into a patch is almost impossible. But we had a brainwave whilst we had the 303 clone out, and we thought, well, why not? Don't we just make a load of acid loops? And that's exactly what we did. So here are a whole load of bonus acid lines that we made using the 303 clone. They're in 2 keys, D minor and G minor. So what we've got, each one is presented static, and then also we've got one where we just kill it on all of the knob twiddling. So once again, this is our mission to provide the most useful versions of everything. We've got a static short loop. And then a long stem where we've twiddled constantly throughout the whole thing. Because as fellow Brighton resident Norman Cook always said, everybody loves a 303. And if you're interested in the notes that we generated for these, here they all are. All of the MIDI files for all of the projects are available inside the Logic folder. And of course, all of that acid has made its way into the Apple Loop collection. You hear that effect that kind of slides down into the piano? Well, that is simply made up of a separate channel that's running 30-second versions of the chord. And then all I've done is automated a high-pass filter and add them together, and they just fall beautifully into each other when you have them balanced correctly. So even in this world of crazy plugins, sometimes the built-in tools from your DAW are all you need. Also with these projects, we're trying to build in as many arrangement techniques from the era that are translatable into modern terms as we can. I'm noticing there's been a huge increase in really short so-called extended versions, like some are even 3 minutes 40. God knows you don't want to play that if you need to go to the toilet whilst you're DJing. So here we are doing proper classic era arrangements. So this section we've got a soft build-up. And also, if you're ever interested why on our templates we don't start at bar 1, it's because some plugins do not actually send back the correct latency value to the DAWs. That means that you can clip the beginning of a track if you actually bounce it down from exactly that bar position. I always suggest to everybody, bounce from either a bar before or just a little way before to make sure you don't clip the front. Then we build through here in our groove section, our main, I suppose as you'd like to call it in modern parlance, our drop. And obviously we've been through that bit before. Then we get to the main chord section. Then it all fires in with those chords against the drums and bass. Now, you hear that bass line against the chords, you'll be amazed what you can get away with chordally against a one-note bass line. One little emotional trick that we've played here is that the piano chords are actually 4 bars long. So if I just select both, you'll see what I mean. So here at the top are the piano chords, and here is the bass line. And you see for the first time round, it's just hanging on that one bottom note. But when we actually come to the second round of the chords, it's lifting up. And I'm sure even on headphones or wherever you are listening to this, you can hear that kind of emotional pressure. You just get this lift. It's such a simple thing. And I'm sure all of you out there that are training going, oh my goodness, I can't believe you're saying something so simple. Well, actually working out The most simple things to work in club music are often the most vital, because when a bass line is just pumping away on one note for a period of time, when you get an instant change just for a bit that then pops back down, it can feel amazing. Now let's head into the section after those chords and we drop back down to the one note and a vocal comes in. But there's something quite particular about it that I want to talk about. Now, even though those vocals are actually on an audio file down here at the bottom, they are available in the tempo synchronized patches as well, but I've processed them in a particular way. Quite a few of the prog guys went through a period where everything had a degree of movement in it, and particularly vocals. You can hear these on some classic 90s Sasha remixes. These days, that's an effect that's easy to get. You can send any kind of signal, just a simple synth sound like this, and then pick that audio up on something like the Fab Filter Pro G, or even a lot of the built-in DAW gates. This is one of the most ubiquitous pieces of equipment from the late 80s, 90s and early 2000s. This is the Drawmer DS201 noise gate. Now, this was often used to kind of isolate drums from an acoustic drum kit or maybe remove the noise from a tape machine. But in the 90s, we all discovered a fantastic technique where you could take a simple tone or a drum sound like hi-hats were always a classic, feed them into this connection on the back, and this would actually key or sidechain and open the gate. So you can get these rhythmic kind of stutters. And I've gone back to this technique for these vocals. Obviously, we're spoilt for choice with trance gates and all of the kind of plugins that we're used to that can do this kind of thing. But back in the day, this is how it was done, and it can still sound unique. Just before we move on to the next project, I want to show you the MPC Expansion. We've taken all of the drums and the drum kits and added them in here. We formatted them in exactly the same way we do all of our MPC expansions, and that also includes preview. So if we come down here, let's look at the project we were just on, Orbit. You'll see the preview comes up, double click it, it will load into the MPC, all of the sounds and the sequence. All of the individual sound menus are also in place there, including all of those fantastic SP1200 resampled drums. This can be found in its own separate folder. It's an XBN file, but we've also got an additional manual that will show you not only how to install it on a contemporary MPC, but also send it out ready for your hardware MPC should you have one. And as I say, don't forget this works with the free edition MPC Beats. Let's drop the tempo down now to 123 and head to our next brand new template for this pack called Chicago. So with this, we're covering some of the more soulful elements of the music that was coming out of the original house scene back in the 90s. A couple of classic organ patches really working well against the basses that we've got in there. Obviously, this one is the classic lately bass from the TX81Z by Yamaha, but it's also being doubled up by one of our brand new DX7 patches. I've had a DX7 Mark II for quite a while, and whilst putting a whole load of patches on this brand new cartridge that I've got that holds multiple banks, I realised that a lot of the bass sounds I were coming across were perfect for classic styles of house, so we went in and multi-sampled a ton of them for you. Also, because it's not analog and it's using computational waves in the background, it's incredibly consistent between notes, which sometimes is exactly what you need in house productions. So don't forget to go and check all of them out in the basses section of the sound library. We haven't used all of them in these arrangements or in these productions. There's plenty more material to have a play with. And don't forget, every single patch also comes with a set of smart controls and a plug-in chain already set and ready to go. And once again, we're trying to give you as many different arrangement ideas and concepts as we can with these packs. So after that main organ section with the drums, we head into more of a one-note or bass-driven section. And yet again, we've done what we've done with the previous arrangements, is really change it as we've gone over time. So each part almost has different degrees of personality. Building some of this into your own production can really make your work stand out, because at the moment I'm noticing a lot of tracks just do one thing from start to finish and bring a few elements in and out, filter stuff out. If you really want to grab someone's attention, particularly these days in the most competitive version of the industry, build in new sections. Find something else. It's also a perfect way of getting out of those 8-bar loop issues. So over the course of a few minutes, we've straddled that basic build-up. The main riff. Then that riff kicks in with the drums. Then we break down pretty much to just the bass and the drums. But we've got a couple of wonderful playable patches here. For a start, the staccato sax. And our soulful electric piano sound. All of these sounds were taken from classic 90s rompler units. But also in this breakdown, a perfect use of our tempo synchronized sax riffs. Let's bring the tempo of this section all the way down to 113 BPM. So this is very similar to our normal sound menus, with one particular riff or one little note attached to every key across a certain key span. but we've actually turned flex time on inside. Now, we've had a few people ask, how do you do this en masse? Well, it's actually hidden normally. In the latest versions of Logic, if you come up to this bit in the zone mapping and you show visible list columns, make sure flex is turned on. By default, it's actually turned off and you don't even have access to those controls. So make sure it's turned on, and then what I would suggest, one of the options in the latest versions is turn them all on, show all columns, use a column layout as default. So in other words, every time now you open Logic Sampler, you're going to see all of those columns. This often gets overlooked as a sampler, but I cannot stress on you enough how important it is to learn this incredible beast of a plugin. We then jump into an interesting one-note section hanging around the root note of the track. And if you've got a production with an awful lot of notes in it, a lot of chords, sometimes just hanging back to the root just for a while can really help. It's that feeling of heads down in a club. Let's just get on with it. Let's have a dance. And we know the breakdown's going to come, and then you can go glorious at the end. And that's exactly what we've done again. We've raised the level of the chordal structure by the end of it again. And it's wonderful to hear those kind of chord sequences coming back a little bit. I think we're going to hear more of them as the natural 30-year progression and cycle of music comes back around. So let's just solo the drums and effects for the moment. So for this production, I'm using triggered MIDI using the new drum kit menus that we've created from the bonus SP1200 resampled sounds. So this will show you just how quickly you can get a thick, powerful 90s sounding beat together with these sounds. And of course, we've got to have a couple of loops to keep things going along. You hear how those loops sound a little bit weak by themselves. That's because they've been perfectly set up to fit with everything. Now let's add the bass. And one thing that really stands out for me when I was putting this together is how well these SP1200 hi-hats work. Now let's add the shakers. Now you hear when you combine sounds from an SP1200 from those older samplers, they don't seem to get harsh as quickly. We have done quite a bit of processing work to make sure they all sound fantastic, and we're ever so glad to get a load of sounds out of it for you guys, particularly the kicks. That kick was actually tuned down from its standard pitch, and that's why you get that aliasing tone right at the top there. And it just makes these principal drums from that machine stand out a bit. In a push to now make our releases as useful as humanly possible, we realise a lot of you use other DAWs, other plugins, and even different hardware. So all of our drum hits are available here. Here's the collection of SP1200 claps, hats, that crunch on them, my God, it just makes you want to go and program beats. An extraordinary amount of shakers. Because if you want to know where the real grooves come from the house of that era, it's in the shakers. So now let's talk about the startup files. Every one of the 7 major projects in here has its own corresponding startup file. What this is going to do is load up the entire drum and effects production, all of the instruments, but with all of the MIDI parts of the instruments taken away, so you are free to generate your own parts instantly. One thing I would suggest you might want to do is take the AD limiter just off the plugin chain at the end. Now you're already creating. And don't forget, as many of the parts are MIDI, you can quickly click on them and see the actual swing values that we've used in the original production. Here we're using 16D, so I'm just going to grab that. The swings in Logic, it's a little known fact, but A, B, C, D and E, F actually came from the Linndrum. So even today, Roger Lynn's incredible contribution to music and groove is affecting any musician using Logic. Coming forward in time a bit, this project, Black Widow, references the glory days of funky house. It's aimed just at the era before I started working as the Freemasons, but we're using a lot of techniques from that time. The arrangements ebbs and flows as those records always did, with plenty of breakdown fun. So we've tried to spread the production techniques across all of these different projects. This one actually uses a very simply multi-sampled Fender jazz bass. But the first note is played from another little patch. It's like a sound menu patch of different sort of effects that you can get off a bass. So have a look at how we've actually compositely pieced the bass line together, because it's this mixture of using slightly chopped up versions of real played notes along with a program part that really gives it the funk. And we're also adding to that a brilliant patch that is a load of little bits that were sampled from a Jupiter 8 in this key and tempo. And then we're filtering in and out of that using automation, particularly for that rise up there. It builds up further and then it hits a really atmospheric part. So this is a project that's great fun to dig all the way through, but you may not have noticed something subliminally that's running in the background. There is quite an interesting little pitch tone. I'm just going to solo two of them here. And this one. And these come in and out later on throughout the track. But having that high, almost screechy note really quietly in the background and sidechained is one of the tricks that Russell and I employed throughout the entirety of the Freemasons era. It's really subliminal, but having that sustained root note across anything that you're actually building gives it this additional layer of energy, and you heard it come in and out there. Okay, let's jump a little bit between the different projects. This is White Label. This builds up and breaks down to this. So we got a classic 90s string pad here, playing alongside a Juno pad. Pair them together, you just get this wonderfulness. So we're right back into the early 90s for that, but you hear how those SP1200 drums again are really making this sound thick without any effort. This video is starting to get absolutely huge, but we've got so many projects in here, I just want to give you a quick taste of all of them. This is Madagascar with a fantastic version of the classic organ bass patch. Now, what's special about this sound, let me just solo it, is that this was resampled through an 8-bit process. And you hear the different overtones that you're getting on different notes, and yet it's still musical. This is now my favorite organ bass patch that we've actually created here. It cuts through anything. Organ basses are notoriously difficult. I speak to my friends in mastering and they say it's always a nightmare when it comes in because you can push certain frequencies and the whole thing just distorts. This sits beautifully because of that layer of digital crust at the top. And this is why these old boxes still have something to say in the modern era. Okay, now let's just head off to France briefly. So much to take away from this particular project, particularly when we get into the latter parts of it, because once again, we're going off somewhere different. And don't forget, everything you're hearing here is just purely from the built-in plugins that are available in Logic. You start putting modern plugins on this, you can push these things an awful lot harder in your own productions and get some astonishing results out of them. One quick note, you'll see at the top of a lot of these F9 grooves. Please leave these exactly where they are. These are the quantized grooves that are used for the project. And the reason we've got them here, often we have them hidden on the TRAX templates. Normally, we're not allowed to use hidden tracks on the iPad version of Logic, so we have to have them on the page. All of these projects have been carefully formatted so they will work on the iPad version of Logic. As always, we have a full and comprehensive PDF manual inside this release with an entire section dedicating to showing you how to get this across to your iPad version of Logic from your computer. Please do check out this manual. We go to great lengths to write these to make sure that they cover nearly everything that we can possibly think of about the packs. And we don't know anybody else at this price point that goes as far as we do here. So here we are, TRAX House Nation. So just to sum up, you've got 7 fully functioning Logic productions as well as the associated startup page with all the drums and effects in place and all of the MIDI ready to go. As I've said before, we want to make this as useful as possible. So all of the musical parts as well as all of the drums have been cut out as WAV loops, and we've sorted them in 2 different manners. Sorted them by project. This is ever so handy if there's one or a collection of things you want from a particular project. And also here you know that all the musical loops are going to be in one key, but we've also sorted them and duplicated them all by sound type. There's our fantastic acid loops at the top, bass loop, clap loop, cymbal loops, blah, blah, blah. You know exactly what you're doing there. All of those have been replicated as Apple loops ready to install. These are the preview Apple loops that you can install on your system, drag across from the loop browser onto a blank instrument channel or an empty part of the arrangement to load that patch. All of the drum hits cut out and easily accessible in the main library. All of the MIDI files involved in this release. An MPC expansion where we've taken all of the drum kits and all of the drum sounds and menus and pieced them together in the standard Akai format. And we've even added a collection of bonus impulse responses. And of course, as always, a full manual that will talk you through the installation process.
That's it for this video, and thank you so much for watching. F9 TRAX House Nation V1.5 update has been an absolutely belting thing to do at the back end of a year like this because it set us up perfectly for 2025. We've only got one mission from this point onwards, and that is to make the most damn useful sample packs we possibly can. We love hearing from you guys, so please stay in touch. It is you that drive us forward and drive this entire process forward. We can't wait to arm you up with the best tools to make your music, your unique music, in the coming years.